We're proud to support the craft of journalism. UBS brings you the latest news from around the world with The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Be part of an international network that brings together leading insights, research and technology across 24 time zones and 12 key financial hubs, with you at the center of it all. UBS. Advice is our craft.
You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 24th of September 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Live from D90 in Zurich, this is The Globalist. I'm Tom Edwards. Coming up on today's programme, the UN General Assembly continues in New York City. Our Carlotta Rebello will bring us the latest. I imagine that a certain speech from a certain US president might crop up in dispatches. Then Georgina Godwin in London has been busy reviewing the day's newspapers. What have you spotted today, Georgina?
Speaking of that UN visit, it was marked by a broken escalator, a dead teleprompter and a rogue audio feed. The White House calls it sabotage. The UN calls it bad luck. We'll also be looking at one of Egypt's most high-profile dissidents who's been released from prison, and I'm sure we'll find some fun stories too.
Thanks, Georgina. Here's hoping. And a little later, Monocle's golf correspondent will join the show with an ornithological update from the region. What's on your radar, Inzi?
Well, I'll be telling you a bit about falcons at 30,000 feet and why Gulf Airlines are strapping raptors into business class.
More from Inzamam Rashid later, plus Vatican news and fat jabs. Oh yes, all ahead on The Globalist, live from Zurich with me, Tom Edwards. Yes, a very warm welcome to this Wednesday edition of The Globalist, wherever you are in the world. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good morning to London. Georgina Godwin is there in Midori House, the usual setting for The Globalist. How are you today, Georgina?
Well, we've just had quite a row in the studio. It wasn't between me and Elliot, the sound manager. It was between me and a fly, a very buzzy, loud fly that kept kind of dive-bombing the microphone. But Elliot has managed to usher it out, and we're ready to go on air now.
Georgina, you had to draft Elliot in to help you deal with that.
Well, so the thing was, I didn't want to kill it.
Oh, okay.
And he did it very humanely. He sort of wafted it gently away. I was amazed.
He's a peaceful man. I thought you were going to strike it with a rolled-up newspaper, thus demonstrating the power of print, Georgina. No? Anyway, let's move on. Georgina, listen, amongst your other duties, fly distraction and destruction on the list, you've been keeping an eye on some of the other stories that are knocking about today around the world.
Indeed. So NATO warns Russia after the Estonian airspace breach and vows it will use all necessary tools to defend its allies. Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has pledged $1 billion to a new global fund to protect tropical forests. And Gucci opened Milan Fashion Week with a film debut by the new creative director Demna yesterday, starring Demi Moore and Edward Norton.
Excellent stuff. Thank you, Georgina. Do stay tuned to Monocle Radio, listeners, throughout the day for more on those as we follow stories, breaking news and more. But first, to New York City. The UN General Assembly continues, and to make sense of yesterday's developments and perhaps to look ahead to what we might expect today, I'm delighted to say, alongside Georgina, I'm joined now by Carlotta Rebello, Monocle's senior foreign correspondent. Or actually, you're on the road, Carlotta. Where do we find you this morning?
Well, not on the road just yet, Tom, but en route to the airport immediately after.
Okay, and you're going back to the motherland, I gather?
Yes, heading to Portugal, to Lisbon, for an event we're doing at the beautiful Gulbenkian Foundation, and I'll be telling you all about it in a show tomorrow. Oh,
very exciting. We'll look forward to that. But tell me, what did you make yesterday, Carlotta? I mean, we don't have to start with Donald Trump, but maybe we do have to start with Donald Trump. We've been talking about this on all of our programs. What did you make of his? I mean, it's pretty, even by his own established standards, a pretty extraordinary address.
Yes, it's inevitable to start with Donald Trump. His 55-minute speech really marked the assembly yesterday. Now, you might remember the last time he spoke at UNGA. This was in 2020, and essentially he left the General Assembly with the world, quote unquote, laughing at him. And yesterday the mood had completely shifted. He dismissed the United Nations, calling it ineffective, called for world leaders to rally. But actually, the few things that came out that are making the news today and are potentially going to have some impact is the major pivot on Ukraine, saying that now he believes that Kyiv can win back all of its territory from Russia. And this is something that, of course, the European allies have hailed, because it marks a clear shift. We know that his relationship with Russia and with Vladimir Putin has always kind of been overshadowing a lot of the conversations about the US's stance on how to end the war in Ukraine. And this marked the very first clear shift. He also had a meeting with several Arab leaders yesterday. And while we don't know the exact detail yet, he met on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly with leaders from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Egypt, Jordan, Turkey, Indonesia, and Pakistan. And it is said and reported that he presented the US's plan to what, post-war governance in Gaza and peace could look like. We're waiting for those details to be made clear, but this is the most concrete proposal to date from Trump and his administration on the plans to end this war. It included something about the freeing of the hostages and also what would be the principles around a potential Israeli withdrawal. And in that meeting as well, we heard from Indonesia's president, Prabowo Subianto, who said that his country was prepared to send soldiers for a peacekeeping force in Gaza under this plan too.
Yeah, and it's interesting, I suppose, when you get more substantive undertakings through other world leaders, because you wonder that perhaps, or hope that what they say may, in some respect, measure up with what they intend to do. I guess the problem with Trump, Carlos, in particular, you said, it's the first time he said X, the first time he said Y. Also in that speech, he repeated loads of malicious falsehoods, certainly about London. That really riled me yesterday, what he was saying about Sadiq Khan. But he doubled down on complete fantasy about the climate crisis. And obviously this was a day when he'd kicked things off by talking about, this complete fiction in terms of the dangers of paracetamol and autism. So he continues to peddle these absolute falsehoods. You can't surely then give credence to what he may say, even about something as serious as Ukraine, I suppose. I mean, I don't know. What did you make of that? Or did you sense that the pronouncements that he's made on Truth Social or whatever it is, maybe, I don't know, have greater credence?
Look, Tom, it is difficult with Trump because, as you say, what he says today, it doesn't mean that he's actually, one, believes it or is going to go ahead with those plans. I don't know if this is the beginning of us seeing a difference in discourse for the domestic audience and international audience. But at least what we could sense from yesterday was that a lot of the remarks, despite the extremely, extremely long speech, were welcomed by some of his counterparts. Of course, he still went very Trump in style in criticizing everything and everyone and claiming to have ended 7 wars, I think it was the number, already, including wars that I don't think people even knew were happening, not even those nations involved. And that's, very Trump in his own way. But at the end of the day, we know that, this is the leader of the United States. His words should and still matter. And that's the danger of the Trump presidency. And a lot of, despite the protests that were happening outside, despite everything, and of course I know that Georgina nodded there to some of the other more incidents that happened inside the United Nations, and I'm sure she's going to get to it a bit later in the show. It's everything that's everyone is talking about is the impact of his words and the gravitas it carries. Now, will this turn into tangible action? It remains to be seen, but the fact that this was said in such a public forum like the United Nations General Assembly at least gives it the gravitas for the other world leaders to take him up on his word.
Indeed, and you're right. We'll get into this with Georgina, but I think if people had imagined Trump talking about an escalating crisis, he might have been talking geopolitics, not mobility solutions. But we'll come to that in a moment. Carlotta, look, the UN UNGA, it rattles on. What else do we need to be looking out for? Are there any specific people you're looking forward to hearing from, and what should we be keeping an eye and an ear out for as the jamboree continues?
Of course, personally, I'm curious to see what would be the speech from my own president, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa from Portugal. Traditionally, Portugal, just literally keeps the peace and everyone and pleases everyone. But there have been hints that he might be indicating some of the alliances and stance of Portugal in terms of peacekeeping efforts in Africa. So I'm quite keen to hear if anything is going to be said about that, like the speech and the statement, rather, by Lula da Silva on climate change. There's going to be a lot of that today, or at least we're expecting that today. And of course, we have COP30 just around the corner, around 40 days or something like that, until the United Nations Climate Change Conference. So I think that's going to be the theme to watch out for, and see which nations are actually committed to include that. When we talk about, peace and the future of the world, it's not just, actual war, but actually ensuring we continue to take all the efforts to protect the environment and make sure that we continue to have thriving rainforests and oceans.
Wise words and smart insights, as always, from our Carlotta Rebelo. Carlotta, happy travels. Get back to Portugal safely. That's Monocle Senior Correspondent joining us here on The Globalist. It is 10 minutes past 8 in Zurich, 10 minutes past 7 over in London. Let's continue with a review of the day's newspapers from there at Midori House, our London HQ. It is Monocle's Georgina Godwin. Morning again, Georgina. Now, Trump, we've been talking about it already. This is really interesting. He sort of hinted, and you alluded at the top of the show, to his visit being sabotaged by UN staff keen to see him literally or metaphorically trip up. What do the newspapers say about this?
Well, I mean, obviously Trump is on every single front page, but some of them do a bit more of a deep dive into this allegation of sabotage. The Times is talking about it. It claims that UN workers had joked about staging pranks to highlight the organisation's funding shortfalls due to Trump's cash freeze on the UN. The White House says the US Secret Service is investigating whether that was indeed a deliberate act. So what actually happened? They were on the escalator, and it suddenly stopped. His teleprompter failed to start, and then at one point, and I don't know if you were watching the speech live, I kept thinking there was something wrong with my device when this kind of foreign language came in. I thought, oh no, I've got two tabs open at once. But no, there was a genuine problem. Some translator apparently just pushed the wrong button. The UN says that the escalator failure was triggered by the Trump videographer, and apparently the teleprompter is not controlled by the UN itself. So, I mean, what Trump did was he worked the glitches into his speech. He quipped that all he got from the UN was a bad escalator and a bad teleprompter. But he praised Melania's fitness for avoiding a fall. She just powered up those stairs with him kind of dragging on behind her. And so, I mean, it was quite a moment of levity, I suppose, for the rest of us, put next to the other appalling lies that this man was spewing.
We spoke a lot about those on previous programmes, so let's not shine a light on them anymore. And as you said, Georgina, the fallout's going to continue. I mean, his special forces investigation, absolute absurdity. Anyway, let's change gears and pivot slightly. Gigi, you mentioned at the top of the show this really interesting story out of Egypt. I know it's been covered across the networks on Reuters and so forth. This is quite an interesting one. Give us a quick sort of potted history of how we've got to where we are.
So the man is Alaa Abdel El Fattah, and he's been released from prison. He's 43 years old. He's an Egyptian-British activist, and he was pardoned on Tuesday. So the reason he was in prison is he spent, in fact, much of his adult life behind bars. He was first detained just before the 2011 Arab Spring, and he became a symbol of resistance against Sisi's sweeping crackdown on dissent after the military takeover in 2013, he was put in jail again, and once again in 2019. It keeps happening. He's staged multiple hunger strikes, but his family and other groups, including English Pen, have been tirelessly campaigning to get him out. He's finally out. Egypt's National Council for Human Rights have described his pardon as a sign of the government's commitment to swift justice. Well, I'm not sure how swift that is, given that his first arrest was in 2011. But his family have made it clear that their fight isn't over. They say that their true joy will only come when no political prisoners remain in Egypt.
Yeah, and do we know? I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, Gigi? I always think about, what's the longer term impact? Is this reflective of, I don't know, a greater willingness to kind of listen to the cases that are made by the large number of, long serving and long suffering, essentially political prisoners? Is it an outlier case? I don't know. It's probably a little early to speculate as to what the longer term impact might be.
I mean, I think that Egypt is getting more and more involved in global negotiations about peace within the region, and I think this has to come as an indication that they are good actors, if you like, that this is not a despotic regime, and that they are taking things like this seriously as they do become more involved and become more pivotal and important to the discussions around what happens in the region.
Georgina, let's jump over the pond. The New York Times, there's a bit of a, I don't know, what is this? This is an art story. It's a cultural, it's kind of cultural news based upon an established piece of art. Tell us more.
Well, I like to think of it just as a dog story, frankly. So it's researchers at the Rijksmuseum, that's obviously in Amsterdam. They say they've identified the inspiration for the dog in the lower corner of Rembrandt's The Night Watch. That was painted back in 1642. Now, apparently, the pose matches a drawing by the Dutch artist Adrian van der Ven, which was later engraved by Francois Schilleman. And it was found by a curator, Annie Lenders. So she spotted the drawing while she was visiting an exhibition, and she immediately recognised the dog's distinctive head turn. And so what people are saying about this is that Rembrandt didn't copy, but he borrowed and adapted, and he placed the dog in a more animated and startled pose, reacting to a drummer. I don't know if you've seen it close up, but it's very sweet. It's bum in the air, tail wagging, looking very, very alert. And it sort of comes, it comes as the painting is undergoing this major restoration, a multi-million euro restoration of the Night Watch, which has also revealed that Rembrandt first sketched the dog in chalk as part of an underdrawing. Experts still, though, can't agree on the breed of dog, but what they do say is that even 400 years after it was painted, Rembrandt's masterpiece continues to yield new insights, and it reminds us how great art resists final interpretation.
Oh, that's very good. That's quite profound, Georgina. When you said inspiration, not even the breed. I was hoping we'd get this dog's full credentials.
I know, me too.
Full name. Did he have a sort of a good honest Dutch name?
Yes.
But anyway, well, there's more digging to be done. Right, let's go from the surly bounds of the planet, Georgina, and look skywards. We do love a bit of a kind of space exploration, final frontier, and all that. And this is kind of exciting if you are a bit of a kind of amateur space watcher, because you kind of think, oh, moon missions, we got that out of our system in the early 70s, but no, it's back.
Absolutely. So Artemis is NASA's flagship program to establish a long-term human presence on the moon with the eventual aim of supporting Mars missions. And so the sort of breaking line on this is that it hopes to launch Artemis 2 as early as February. That's moving its target up from April. Now, this isn't actually going to the moon, or it's not landing on the moon. It's a 10-day crewed flight around the moon, and it's the first since Apollo 17 in 1972. So there's going to be 4 astronauts, and they're going to be testing the Space Launch System, with the SLS rocket, and the Orion crew capsule in deep space conditions. So it's going to travel about 5,000 nautical miles past the moon, and that's further than any humans have gone before it returns to Earth. There are a number of scientific goals. The astronauts will be guinea pigs for biomedical experiments, including growing blood-derived organoids. No, me neither. But apparently it's something to do with studying effects of the radiation and microgravity. There are a lot of challenges too. There were heat shield issues previously from the uncrewed Artemis 1 test flight back in 2022. The next steps are that obviously the success of this will determine the schedule for Artemis 3, which is the planned moon landing mission. It's currently targeted for no earlier than mid-2027, but experts do say that's rather optimistic. And I wonder if Donald Trump is going to make his ultimate mission to make that happen on his watch, so he can say that he took us beyond this world. It's out of this world, I tell you. It's never been better. He is the best president in the world. This will be the best moon landing ever in the history of the planet. No, outside of the planet.
Well, I thought we were going to leave Donald Trump well behind us, but he's back. The spectre endures. Georgina in London, thanks very much for now. Georgina is sticking with us, and she'll be back a bit later in the show. Plenty more still to come in the programme. Our good friend Juliet Linley is here. What will you be telling us about, Juliet?
Tom, the Pope has finally given his first interview. And we've also got on Italian planes 3 times as large as previously, dogs are allowed to go up in the air.
Good news for Fido. We can't wait to hear more about that a bit later. Juliet, you're listening to The Globalist.
Each of us has a craft, a calling that inspires us. Whether it's how a coffee is brewed, a chair is built, or how money is looked after. There's a love for the work, a care that compels you forward. For us at UBS, it's about designing a unique outcome for you. Because whatever your craft may be, ours is built around helping you succeed. UBS. Banking is our craft.
It is 20 minutes past the hour. Time for, Weather Watch next on The Globalist. Joining me from Bangkok is James Chambers, Monocle's Asia editor. Good afternoon to you, James. Listen, bring us up to speed. This is this super typhoon that's wreaked all kinds of damage and chaos already. Bring us up to speed. What do we know? What's the latest?
Yeah, I mean, our listeners over in your part of the world, in the Atlantic, are used to talking about hurricanes, but in Asia, in this part of the world, they're called typhoons. And I guess you can't have missed the news this week that the biggest storm anywhere in the world this year has been hurtling towards Hong Kong over the last few days. It hit the city this morning. The observatory raised the top warning, the T10, which people in Hong Kong were very familiar with, it caused all sorts of damage. Felling trees, throwing boats against the harbour. It even flooded a luxury hotel on the waterside where we hosted our Chiefs event last year, the Fullerton. I think that's been one of the most popular videos being shared around social media of the seawater kind of cascading into the lobby. So there's been a lot of damage across Hong Kong, but the cleanup will now begin now that the storm has passed through. I mean, but the good news is the kind of the human damage is very minimal. Hong Kong was very prepared for this. People did know it was coming. They did take precautions. But it is worth noting that in Taiwan, 14 people did die when a lake burst over its banks. So there is a human tragedy as well.
Absolutely, James. And I guess this is one of these themes that we often return to on Monocle Radio, isn't it? About not just resilience in big urban centres, but, capacity, preparedness for any number of different challenges. And I guess it's encouraging, as you say, that Hong Kong in particular was able to, a city where you spent so much time, was able to sort of mitigate the worst impacts. We're having to get used to the increasing... not just the increasing frequency, but the increasing severity of these kinds of incidents across the wider region. Even if we come back to, in Bangkok where you are, is there a sense that the collective planning, the investment in resources, the investment in infrastructure is keeping pace with that changing challenge. And you mentioned in eastern Taiwan. I mean, that's pretty grave. That's a huge number of people injured. I guess you can never completely mitigate against this, but what's the sense of how well the process of improving those practices is going?
Well, living in Hong Kong, these typhoons are an annual event, an annual tradition. And it is a city that has, learnt from these events for its entire history. And it's got better and better and better and invested more and more money. It is a very rich city, but as you know, Tom, it's not the type of place that looks like it would stand up well in a storm. I mean, this is millions of people kind of cramped into very tall, very skinny skyscrapers perched on the side of a hill. I remember some of my experiences of typhoons, being on the 41st floor, sitting in my apartment, swaying like I was on a ship. But these days you have a lot of confidence in the infrastructure in Hong Kong because they have invested so much money in it and they have learnt from tragedies in the past. So these days, when a typhoon is coming and it's hitting Hong Kong, the kind of reaction is very different to perhaps where it be in parts of maybe the Philippines or southern China or Vietnam, where they're perhaps not so geared up for it. I mean, in Hong Kong, you get to work from home. Schools are closed, and shops all have special typhoon discounts. So there is a kind of an element of it where people kind of look forward to these things. But that has, Hong Kong is in that situation because it has learned over the years how to handle these storms. There will be a lot of damage. I mean, Hong Kong is a very expensive place, but they know how to clean things up. And it's remarkable how the city weathers super typhoons like this. And it's remarkable how quickly it'll get back on its feet and clean up. And this time around, it was the first time that the stock exchange didn't close during a super typhoon. So people were still managing to trade shares throughout the worst of it.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, James, as well, I suppose, and that very point about how dense it is small, but it's quite well managed in terms of like quick collective action. It's quite easy in a smaller geography like that to coordinate a response, and that gets much more difficult and challenging, I guess, when the geography of a country is much more spread out. Just quickly as an aside, and to kind of go back to some of the discussions we've been having out of the UN General Assembly, where Trump basically underscored his bizarre climate crisis denial credentials. Is that kind of rhetoric from Trump in New York? It is and seems a kind of a world away from the crisis on the doorstep where you are. But is that actively unhelpful when people are trying to drive a new narrative about taking responsibility, building resilience, redirecting potentially significant government and federal and local investment into climate crisis management? If he's making those kind of pronouncements, does that play into the discussion at all? Or do you think that the immediacy of these crises, the news, as you said, these incredible pictures that people see, does that trump, if you will, in terms of people knowing they have to engage with this, redirect resources, take it more seriously?
Yeah, I mean, here in Bangkok, we're a long way away from the typhoon, but we will feel the effects. And on the front page of the Bangkok Post today, it is, the main headline is about the capital getting ready for torrential rain, which will come in the next few days. That typhoon is heading to the southern China and Vietnam next, but it'll kind of work its way through, the continental Southeast Asia and land here in Bangkok. But I mean, the funny thing is, it does, as you said, it does trump. There's no talk of him or what's going on at the UN at this point. This is typhoon time, and actually these discussions about these mega storms and this one being the biggest one of the year, you don't really have any talk of it being in any way related to climate change. I don't know what the scientists would say to that, but it's just not part of the reporting. These things, as I said, have happened, throughout history, and as long as Hong Kong has been a city, and there's been devastating storms for the last 250 years. So it's not something that people are talking about. It's getting better or worse. It's just something that Hong Kong and a lot of the cities in this region have to live with. It is this part of the world, the Pearl River Delta, has an incredible amount of people here. I mean, in Guangdong province, there's about 125 million people. And they do say that if there was some kind of super disaster to hit this region, it would be one of the most devastating in the world. So I'm not sure how that would look like, but it's a part of the world that's had to prepare because it happens every year.
James, thanks so much. Always great to check in with you. That's our James Chambers, Monocle's Asia editor, talking to us on the Globus from Bangkok this morning or this afternoon, where he is. Now, plenty more that we're watching today. Back over to London, Georgina Godwin is standing by with some of the other stories we're following.
Thanks, Tom. NATO has issued its strongest warning yet to Moscow after Russian jets violated Estonian airspace. The alliance says it will use all necessary military and non-military tools to defend itself as calls grow for tougher responses to incursions. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva announced Brazil's first contribution to the Tropical Forests Forever facility. The $1 billion pledge is aimed at unlocking wider support ahead of COP30 in the Amazonian city of Belém. And Demna, the Georgian designer who reinvented Balenciaga, unveiled his first Gucci collection in a Spike Jonze co-directed film yesterday. The cinematic debut marks Kering's bid to revive the storied Italian label after 2 years of sliding sales.
Thank you very much indeed, Georgina. Really interesting, actually, that Demna story, because I've been talking a lot to our Sophie Grove and Brenda Tui, who've been over here in Zurich, and chatting to Natalie Teodosi, who's been on the road, all about the kind of ongoing, game of musical chairs amongst creative directors of all these different maisons, the different houses. And it's interesting, Georgina, they're really leaning into this kind of experiential thing, the idea that they're not just making garments, they're not just pushing the clothing, they're not just selling products, they're kind of offering something deeper and experience. It's kind of really interesting how they're pushing those boundaries, and it's a little bit of personnel, it's a little bit of approach, it's a bit of different creative expression. Interesting to watch, right?
Absolutely. I mean, Gucci is fundamentally conservative. I mean, those loafers, for instance. But it does thrive when a designer adds a bit of shock and theatre. You had Tom Ford's sex, Alessandro Michele's gender bending. Now this kind of post-ironic spectacle, I suppose, from Demna, he's the man behind duct-taking Kim Kardashian and sending the Simpsons down a Paris runway. So he really has been hired to bring the edge back to a house famous for, ladylike handbags and things. And Kering really needed 25% down on sales in the last quarter.
Fascinating stuff, Georgina. We'll be keeping a really close eye on that. Across Monocle Radio, when the bandwagon continues to roll through Milan in the rest of the week. You are with the Globalist here on Monocle Radio. It is 29 minutes to 9 here in Zurich. It's 29 minutes to 11 in Dubai. And I'm joined now by Monocle's golf correspondent, Inzamam Rashid. Morning, Inzi. Now, I'm very keen to chat to you today because I don't know if you know this about me. Amongst my many surprising traits, I'm something of an amateur ornithologist. And you've got some good stories from the skies for me today, Inzi. Is that right?
Good morning. I had no idea about that, and you definitely learn something new every day, so I will be taking that to the bank. Thank you. I know what gifts to get you now when I come back to London. Yes, I do want to talk to you about falconry because it is deeply tied to Emirati identity, and the falcon season is beginning. It starts at the beginning of October and ends in March, and soon we are going to be seeing falcons taking business class tickets across the world because they are flying from Doha to Abu Dhabi, from Dubai to New York and to other parts to Europe as well. And falcons, as you would expect, probably have a lot of air miles already because of all the flying they do, are now actually taking chartered flights.
Now, tell me, Lindsay, it is brilliant, and I'm sure our listeners have done this before, but it's well worth a quick Google of those images, because it is incredible of them all kind of lined up in their chairs, heading hooded to their next destination. But if we just interrogate a little deeper, Lindsay, because the sort of the cultural role of these incredible creatures is really extraordinary, and much like with equine bloodstock, it's super high value. It's about, I don't know, but there's so many interesting sort of cultural facets that roll into this importance. Can you just tell us why it's so deeply ingrained kind of culturally in how things work there?
Yeah, it's deeply tied to the Gulf identity, particularly Emirati identity as well. Families, communities bond over the practice, and the season isn't just about sports. It's also a huge social calendar with shared hunts and gatherings, and airlines and charter firms bend to this tradition because of heritage and of wealth. Carries its weight in aviation, but falcons are serious investments. Upkeep can be thousands and thousands of dollars a month. A GPS tracker alone for one single falcon can cost you around $2,000. One bird in Riyadh sold at an auction for 1.2 million dirhams, which is around $300,000. And you can imagine a load of them in one aircraft probably costs more than the aircraft itself. And this is a cultural heritage, but it's also a thriving market. I guess what was once a Gulf pursuit is now drawing interest from buyers in Europe and in Asia, and that's what the Gulf has seen over the last few years. But this particular notion of them getting on a plane is quite interesting, because yes, those images are quite stark. You'll see a man in his white thobe and his kandura in the full Middle Eastern regalia, and a load of falcons perched on top of airplane seats covered in plastic material, because of course all the mess that they make, and you want to protect the planes. But they're also all issued with passports so they can legally travel across borders. They're seated often as well in business class, hooded, calm, sometimes even with live prey, which is all temperature controlled. So they're probably even more picky than some travelers, human travelers. And you can just see serenely this image of a raptor occupying seat 2A, and cabin crew tasked with soothing both humans and birds along their journey. It's the kind of sort of thing that sparks viral photos in Europe, those men in robes and falcons buckled up in seatbelts. I think it's fascinating, but obviously there is a huge business side to this whole venture as well.
Sure. Well, you alluded to it there with live prey, which is somewhat kind of terrifying. I was going to say, did the cabin crew get a bit of a primer on, I don't know, what kind of in-flight snacks, are they kind of chicken or fish guys? Can they open those little tiny packs of airline peanuts with their talons in? I don't know how it works. What's the extra layers of attention the hapless cabin crew have to put into the proceedings?
I imagine there are a lot of rubber gloves involved, some very long tongs as well to pick up live prey and drop it in front of falcons so they can enjoy their in-flight snack. I don't know if they're going around asking whether chicken or beef is what they would prefer on the menu. And also, I don't think, depends what class you're in, I don't think it varies as to what meal you get. But I'm sure they're very satisfied by the time they reach their destination.
Absolutely. Well, here's hoping. Inzi, love it. I think we need to get you on board one of those flights. Just an idea, just a suggestion. I'd listen.
I'd full hazmat suit me.
Exactly. Yeah. Inzi, good to chat with you. That was Monocle's Gulf correspondent in Dubai, Inzamam Rashid. You're listening to Monocle Radio. This is The Globalist. We are all around the globe this morning on The Globalist. Let's cross back to London now. Georgina Godwin, once again standing by. And Georgina, it's kind of over to you. You're going to take charge of the next story for us.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tom. So we're turning to West Africa, where the members of the Alliance of Sahel States, that's Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso, have formally announced their withdrawal from the International Criminal Court, saying it's a tool of neo-colonialist repression. So what does this actually signal about where the region's alliances are headed and the future of international justice. Well, to help me examine this, I'm joined on the line from Cape Town by Talia Parker, who is managing editor of Africa Risk Consulting's information service, ARC Briefing. Talia, many thanks for coming on the show. What does pulling out of the ICC actually mean for these countries in practice?
Thank you, Georgina. I think the decision once again emphasizes these countries' desire to move forward and legitimize the Alliance of Sahel States regional grouping that they have created since exiting ECOWAS, and also shows their desire to continue decreasing ties with Western partners and institutions. The countries have also touted establishing an AES, Criminal and Human Rights Court, which would contest against the ECOWAS Court of Justice for legitimacy, which could, create some regional tensions. And I think it's also very important to note that Tuareg associations from Mali and Burkina Faso have filed an ICC complaint against the Burkinabe Armed Forces, Malian Armed Forces, and mercenaries from Africa Corps, which replaced Wagner Group operating in Mali. And these three actors have also been accused of possible atrocity crimes by organizations, including the UN and Human Rights Watch. So any current investigation will continue despite their withdrawal, but it ultimately helps protect these juntas in a manner from further scrutiny and impacts any recourse for future victims, eroding the human rights situation in the Sahel.
So, of course, we know that Russia has become a key ally for these regimes. How much of this decision is influenced by Moscow's own fight with the ICC?
Well, of course, the first point to raise is that there is an ICC arrest warrant issued against Russia's President Vladimir Putin. And once these countries' withdrawal is finalized, they're under no legal obligation to arrest Putin or any other figure that has an ICC arrest warrant against them. And as you mentioned, Russia is also not a member of the ICC. So the decision can definitely be viewed as aligning these countries with Russia, and very much continues the anti-Western rhetoric these countries have, which Russia has been flaming, especially on social media. And it helps not only build support and prop up these juntas, but definitely the relationship with Russia too.
And what about the relationship with the wider region? How does that change once the group has pulled out of the ICC, following, of course, its exit from ECOWAS?
Well, as mentioned, any kind of criminal and human rights court that they establish would contest against the ECOWAS Court of Justice for legitimacy. And I think it will just, continue flaming the tensions that are already there between the regional partners and continue this ongoing withdrawal. You may see, increased dialogue from ECOWAS, but these countries have made it very clear what their path is. And I think you'll just continue seeing fragmentation of the region.
I mean, they talk about setting up their own systems of justice. Given the violence and the weak institutions on the ground, is that even realistic?
It's a great question. There, will be a lot of steps for them to take, and it's, nothing formal has been announced yet. And I see that the justice ministers from these three countries had a summit on the 16th of September where it was once again discussed. But ultimately, what we have seen from the bloc is actually very little action in terms of putting institutions together, like their promised parliament, joint security forces. So it is a lot of, there is, like I say, it will take a lot of time, and they'd be very slow to follow through on these actions, which I think will continue.
I mean, what can the ICC or the wider international community do in response to this? I mean, anything at all?
I think, unfortunately not. The ICC is yet to release a statement on the withdrawal, but when other countries have, it has simply expressed its regret. A country being party to the Roman Statute, which established the ICC, is voluntary. So, there isn't really any room for recourse. The decision does take a year to be finalized by the General Secretariat, but there may be some room for dialogue, but it is highly unlikely that they will revert on their decision. I think, as I stated, it very much fits in with their anti-Western rhetoric, and they need to, kind of stick with that to really prove the legitimacy of their regional group.
I mean, they've pulled up saying that the court is a tool of neo-colonial repression. I wonder how much of this really is about justice, or is it just politics?
I do think, as you say, it is a big political move, and definitely influence behind the scenes to push them to take this next step. But yeah, as you say, ultimately, Burkina Faso and Niger don't have any active cases within the ICC. I believe it's only Mali that has the active cases. So I also, as you said, think it has limited impact on the justice and human rights angle.
And finally, is this possibly paving a way for a Putin visit? Because, of course, he can't be arrested if they're not a member.
Very possibly. I don't believe that he has visited any of these countries in recent years, even prior to the arrest warrant being issued. You've seen a lot of the junta leaders and ministerial exchanges to Russia. As I say, the decision does take a year to be finalized, so we could very definitely see a visit in 2026.
Talia, thank you very much indeed. That was Talia Parker of the Africa Risk Consulting Group in Cape Town. And after this break, we're back in Zurich with Tom Edwards. Stay tuned.
IQ, EQ, and AI. 3 components key to the craft of innovation at UBS. Because to stay ahead in a rapidly evolving age, you need a partner with decades of experience, endless passion for the work, and a finger on the pulse of leading technologies, bridging human expertise with artificial intelligence, all to elevate you. UBS, banking is our craft.
It is 8:45 here in Zurich. What's on the agenda in the Vatican City and indeed across Italy? Shall we find out, dear listeners? Yes, let's do it. I'm joined now by Juliet Linley, journalist and former Vatican correspondent. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Tom.
It's been fun, hasn't it? We've been spending all sorts of time together here in Zurich this week. Very jolly.
Yeah, we've even been comparing cat stories, but that's for another show.
That's a cat chat for another day. Listen, you alluded to this a little bit earlier. Pope Leo, a first interview. What did you learn, Juliet, from what the great man had to say?
Well, there were a few key takeaways, Tom. And remember, this is history's first American Pope. And who did he give his first interview to? An American reporter. She's actually written his biography already. It's already come out in Peru in Spanish. It'll be coming out in English. Headline of her biography is Leo XIV, Citizen of the World, Missionary of the 21st Century. So that's why he gave her the interview. And here are some of the key takeaways for you, Tom. I mean, he spoke on a range of subjects. Certainly what grabbed the headlines was that he said he has no intention of getting involved in US politics, even though he is an American Pope. Remember, he is also half Peruvian. He said he will speak out, however, on matters pertaining to the Catholic Church and to immigration in relation to America. So he did say that he praised Francis, his predecessor, for earlier this year writing to the American bishops scolding Trump's plans on mass deportations of migrants. So he did go that far. And he said that he hopes US bishops will continue to talk out on those matters. He said he hasn't met or talked to Trump as yet. He confirmed he's talked to J.D. Vance, and he talked about human dignity. And he said, and he repeated, no matter where you're born, he certainly makes it clear that he's not a Trump supporter and that you need to maintain dignity for the immigrants. He said that he is not a Trump supporter, and he was, as a matter of fact, distancing himself from his brother, Louis Prevost, who we have heard is a self-proclaimed MAGA type. So he said, in quotes, we are in different places. That's where he put it. Right. Then, of course, he touched on LGBTQ matters, which people are wondering whether he's going to make major changes. He said, highly unlikely that doctrine will change. In quotes, he said, we have to change attitudes before we can even think about changing what the church says about any given question. And he left it at that. He slightly went into Vatican finances. Tom, it's no secret the Vatican is in a bit of a crunch. It's running a $50 to $60 million structural deficit, and it has a $1 billion plus pension shortfall. He said things are improving. Leo said, I'm not sure that I can say that the crisis is over, but he said he's not losing any sleep about it. And remember, Tom, this is a man who graduated in maths at Villanova University before he went on to study canon law. So I guess he's a bit of a number cruncher. So I guess we can safely assume that if he says that he's not losing sleep over it, we can take that from the Supreme Vatican bean counter. And then just finally, sex abuse scandals, a major issue with the Catholic Church. He said that is a real crisis, still not resolved. He admits the Church hasn't found a way to help victims heal. But he said the scandal cannot be the center focus of the Church. That has to be Jesus and the gospel. Should we move on to
just really quickly, I just wondered, so in terms of the sort of more progressive agenda, if we think about Francis, there was this idea that not just maybe in substantive policy terms, but even just in the rhetoric, in the language, there was this appetite for slightly more progressive, inclusive dialogue. Any hints in these, either in the book or in his interviews, about how he's going to be saying what he's saying, Juliet, just quickly?
He's being very reticent on that, I have to say. He's not going out on a limb. He, of course, emphasized that the Church welcomes everybody, including gay people, that the Church embraces them, but he's not going to change doctrine anytime soon, and neither did Francis. Let's not forget, however much we might have seen him as being progressive, as his critics say, he made a lot of noise, but then in actual terms, he didn't make major changes.
Everything is relative. I believe that's a secular truism, isn't it, Julia? Right, I said the rest of Italy. Let's talk a bit about Giorgia Meloni, because there's been this kind of general strike, a solidarity strike, which is pretty... We've been in the grip of strikes back in London, very much about paying conditions, not solidarity. But tell me, because I was chatting to a couple of colleagues out of the UNGA this week with recognition of Palestinian statehood. A number of them said, Germany will never do it. Italy will never do it. It was absolutely black and white. She's been kind of talking about it. What's she had to say?
Let's put it this way. Giorgia Meloni, speaking at the UN General Assembly to the Italian press, she was being pressed on this and the opposition have been pushing her on this. And she said, okay, I'm going to put it to a vote in Parliament. But here are the two preconditions necessary in order for Italy to recognize Palestinian statehood. 1, release of all remaining Israeli hostages. Number 2, removal, exclusion of Hamas from any governance role in Gaza. So how likely are those two conditions, right, Tom? But I mean, and if you look at Elly Schlein, who is the main opposition leader in Italy, it's unlikely that they're going to just go with that, because they've been calling on Italy, no matter what, to just immediately recognize, follow other European countries. She's not likely to agree to those terms. And she keeps saying in her criticism of Meloni's silence, if you wait until those conditions happen, there's not going to be anything left of Gaza to actually recognize.
Is it actually a difficult issue for Meloni? I sense she's probably just not that bothered about the narrative. I don't know. Is it a thorny one for her to deal with?
Very thorny. I mean, on the one hand, you've got, she's very much a Trump supporter. She's very much seeing herself as sort of the bridge or the tightrope between Europe and the United States. On the other hand, you've got, yes, they called this massive strike in solidarity for Gaza. Interesting, right? You wouldn't have necessarily thought that. But remember, Tom, I mean, 40% of Italians support Palestinian statehood. So it's not a majority, but it's a pretty large chunk, whereas only between 6 and 16% of Italians are saying that Israel's actions are actually proportionate. So there you go. And then you've got 64%, so 1 in 6, saying they are highly concerned about the humanitarian situation in Gaza. And so you had the country came to a standstill. All the key cities had protests, from Milan to Rome, Naples, Palermo. You had blockades on highways, train cancellations, chaos, the same chaos that usually happens when you have strikes. And it was called, this massive 24-hour strike was called by the unions. And they were protesting against genocide in Gaza. They're demanding that Italy stops all arms shipments and military cooperation with Israel. And they're also criticizing Italy's inaction when it comes to Israel. So Meloni is saying, okay, fine, I'm going to put it to a vote. Let's see what happens.
Let's quickly, Julia, no cats, we said, but definitely dogs. We get to the size. We were talking about falcons in flight earlier. Dogs in flight. This might be my favourite story of the day. Tell us about this one.
So as you know, Tom, currently you can only bring a maximum 8-kilo dog or cat on board. You put it in a little carrier. You pay about between 60 and 80 euro, I think, to ITA, probably about the same on other airlines, and you can put it under your feet. in this little bag. Well, now we've got Transport Minister, who is also the Deputy Prime Minister, by the way, Matteo Salvini. He's gone on X with pictures and videos of himself on an ITA flight with 2 dogs weighing up to 25 kilos. One is a Labrador, another is a mixed race, mongrel, is that what you would call it? And he's saying that soon these kind of dogs are going to be able to join the Mile High Canine Club. So he's Italian Transport Minister. He's saying they will have to sit next to their owner, next to the window seat, on the floor, on a mat, and they're obviously going to have to pay a ticket. It's not just going to be the 60 to 80 euro extra. But of course, controversy, right? So, of course, animal activists say it's so cruel that you have to put a dog like that in the baggage hold, which is the case on most airlines at the moment. But then, of course, opponents are saying, well, hang on, like, what if someone is scared of dogs and then there's this massive dog when you're starting to go and look for your seat? And what about if they do some of their business, and that's gonna
great
cause
heavens
some sort
and 25 kilos is that's a chunky unit for a dog, right?
Unit,
but even 8 kilos for a cat, I mean, that's a fat cat. No,
how much does your cat weigh, Tom?
I'd say he's a whisker, forgive me, under 6 kilos. And he's a pretty big unit himself.
Pretty big unit himself. So there you go. Like, I mean, your cat can even reach 25 kilos and you'll be able to take him on board.
Well, interestingly and almost unbelievably, this story does somewhat elegantly segue into our next one, because we do like to bring you the skinny on all the big stories of the day. Where is this going, Tom Edwards? I can hear you ask. Well, let's bring in here at D90 Fabian Kinzelmann, Swiss business reporter at Bloomberg. Fabian, good morning.
Good morning.
What a setup! And we're talking, of course, about, I don't know how to put it, fat jabs,
obesity drugs.
Exactly.
But they are not approved for cats yet.
Okay. I probably will need one soon. But tell me, this is really interesting actually, because there's been so much coverage, of course, of the big players, Eli Lilly, Novo Nordisk, having these huge successes. Although certainly in Novo Nordisk's case, it's not necessarily delivered in terms of corporate performance because of, I guess, mismanaged expectations. But there's news afoot, and other kind of players are interested in the space. Tell us a bit more about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big market, right? Like, it's about, like, the obesity market is about to reach like $100 billion annually by 2030. So, like, every pharma company tries to get into this field, and it's like right now just Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk are playing in it, and like a Swiss pharma company got their foot in. So Roche, that's what you're referring to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Roche just announced this week that they are moving their CT388. So that's the most hopeful candidate right now for obesity drug. That they are moving it to the trial 3 phase, which is like the phase before they would hand it in for approval.
And presumably, Fabian, given the performance as we've seen from these other players, the market's going to like that, right? Roche shareholders, one imagines, are going to like that. But again, is this a bit like sort of a gold rush of fat? Are people kind of jumping to conclusions that this is going to be a game changer? We need to be, I guess, always somewhat measured, a little bit of caution, a bit of patience maybe we need, right?
Yeah. I mean, what we are seeing now with these obesity drugs, as much hype as there is, there's still room for development, right? Because people, for example, reach a plateau with weight loss. They reach it a little bit faster with Ozempic. They reach it a little bit later with Zepbound, which is marketed under the name of Mounjaro. But in the end, they all reach a plateau at some point. So every pharma company is still trying to find the gold formula for making this go away. If that's the Roche one, not so sure, but at least they want to be competitive. And
they want to be in the game. I think our Georgina Godwin is still in situ in London. And Georgina, if we cast our minds back to yesterday, you had a big breaking story for us. And that was your own personal investment, as it were, in this field. What do you make of this? Would you prefer, what about Roche? It got a little bit of a Swiss flavour. Would that appeal to you, perhaps?
And flavours mean nothing to me any longer. So, as I said yesterday, I am in fact on Mounjaro, and I'm finding it absolutely fantastic. I think it's great. But I think one of the things we need to look at is that it's going to change the way that things work fundamentally. It's going to increase inequality because you'll be able to tell at a glance these drugs are expensive. The fat will be poor, the thin won't. You're going to have things like airline seats getting smaller, perhaps. Hospitality is going to have to change. All of this is going to have make a fundamental difference difference to the way we live our lives. And of course, you're seeing with Roche and various other companies, everybody trying to get in on the act because it is going to be so very, very valuable.
If you make those airline seats smaller, though, Georgina, maybe have space to just fit a little poodle in there.
Or indeed a £25 dog, because as we know now from Fabienne, that the drugs don't work on dogs.
So fewer hot dogs, more actual dogs.
They might work, they just have not been approved. That's the interesting thing.
Well, and nor is Mounjaro for weight loss use. It's meant to be for diabetes.
That's true, yeah.
There we go.
That's like the weight loss drug is called Zepbound, but like people know it as like Mounjaro, or they know it as Ozempic, which is actually Wegovy.
It's a super interesting space. I'm afraid there we have to leave it today. Fabienne, brilliant to hear from you. Thanks for coming to chat with us. That was our friend Fabienne Kinzelman from Bloomberg here in Zurich. Thanks, of course, to Georgina and the crew back in London town. But that is all we have time for on this Wednesday edition of the programme. Thanks to our producers here at D90, Laura Kramer and Desiree Bundley, and to our researcher Daniela Braw-Smith and studio manager Elliot Greenfield manning the desk back in London. We'll be back on the Globalist at the same time tomorrow morning. But from me, Tom Edwards in Zurich, that is your Wednesday Globalist. Thanks for listening.